I'm Fe Bongolan. I live in Oakland, California. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, actor, writer, painter, chef, international traveler, um, retired from a civil service job, and enjoying life. That's who I am.
Alrighty, hello. I am Ashley, newsletter editor for the San Francisco International Arts Festival. Please tell me about the Last Supper Party, your inspiration, your motivation behind the piece, the message you wanted to convey with it, and why. Why did you make it?
Well, I had no intention of making that piece. That piece came to me. The 80s were already a rude shock to the system. After the 70s and all of and I'm a child of the 60s too. So after all the revolution and the change and everything that happened, the end of the war. So Reagan came and said it was morning in America, and therefore we don't have to worry about hanging our heads down as Americans. Let's be proud. Let's be greedy. Let's make money. Let's go into business because corporations can solve everything. So, yeah, we were pretty pissed off. And, I took some time and I just started watercoloring. And there was this image of a cruise ship buffet that I saw. And I said, that's interesting. So, I took the concept of these tuxedoed people standing in a buffet line waiting to serve themselves. And I said, let's do something else with this. So instead, I I drew the buffet line of the people on at the table, and the one single thing they were helping themselves to was the planet. And I had no intention of doing that other than having it be a 36 by 24-inch watercolor that would hang in my house. But I happened to bring it to Mark Rennie, who is a friend of mine from the South of Market. And I said, Mark, what do you think? He didn't say a word, he just whistled. I remember that whistle quite well. It was like that. He goes, you're making a billboard out of this. And we put it up on Ninth and Harrison when it was the Billboard Cafe. And 30,000 people a day saw it for, I think, a week, 10 days. The notoriety of that piece has lingered on. And then it was put into storage in the Richmond at a warehouse in Richmond, and he just found it. He unearthed it, and Andrew called me just 3 weeks, no, back in the fall, and he said, um, "Do you want to? Um, are you the painter of the bankers, bankers helping themselves to the world?" I go, "Oh, you mean the Last Supper party? This is 35 years later, okay? The Last Supper party." And he goes, yes, because we want to hang it up in the International Arts Festival office. I said, fine. I'd like to see it, make sure that it's okay, and touch it up if I need to. And so here we are, 35, 37 years later, we're back.
How, in your opinion, has the world changed since this painting, and how has it not?
Well, actually, it hasn't. I mean, that was one of the things Mark and I were laughing at ruefully about is that and imagine you did a work that 40 years projecting in the future still has impact. And that's the most surprising thing to me about doing this piece or having done this piece. You don't know what you're doing when you create. Sometimes it will um, last for a day. It could be ephemeral, and sometimes it could last for a while. After I painted it, Mark wanted me to do more work, more billboards, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not with the same level of let's say, acuity of vision and place in time that that piece had. And I I wandered a bit afterwards because I felt like I didn't want the attention. I didn't think I needed or deserved the attention anymore as a painter because I there was something in me that was searching and um, searching for something that actually that had not actually that had meaning, that had impact. And I I looked away. I walked away from painting, and I went back to a first love of mine, which is theater. Um, 5, 6 years later, after the painting was done, I went to Rodessa Jones's first Medea project. Reality is outside the window, and I sat in the theater stunned, and that feeling of having some kind of electrical energy running up and down your spine, and it fuses it. It's, I guess they would call that Kundalini, and a connection with your highest creative self.
Can you tell me more about that, the Medea Project?
Well, Rodessa and I have known each other even during the Last Supper party. No, just after I painted the Last Supper party, we met. I've known her and I've loved her and respected her for Lily Overstreet and her work with Idris Ackamore, and so uh, there was a kind of, let's say, a regard that I had for her as an artist. I was also the assistant director of the Neighborhood Arts Program, and we were the ones that helped seed fund the matching grant for Rodessa to do her artist in residence at San Francisco County Jail. So there's a kind of already there's a kind of sinking between me and Rodessa on that score. It wasn't until 1991, 92 that where they did their first show that I finally saw the fruits of her residency in the jail. And it was electrifying for me enough to feel like I'm going to drop everything as an artist and do this with her. Um, and so we went in, and I spent the entire 6 months before we were going to go into jail, trying to prepare myself to uh, to work inside because here I am. I'm this working class kid from the suburbs in Watsonville, California, coming to San Francisco, sort of getting my life together here and being an artist. And as a woman of color from new immigrant families, the vision is like this: you've got to get ahead. You gotta keep your head up. You know, climb, climb, climb. Do your best to work in society. And um, and here was Rodessa. This is the ultimate rebel, the wild child. And I said, "Oh God, we got to do this." And so I followed her basically into hell. I followed Rodessa into hell, which was at that time county jail in San Bruno. And I learned a lot about middle class pretension, about being sheltered, about being afraid of people who are considered um, not to be touched, not to be addressed. You have to stay the course and be acceptable. The My first evening in jail, we met with a group of inmates, and because Rodessa has already known my work as a theater artist, she had me work with one of the women to help her tell her story, and her name is Juanita. And so I got her to write down what happened to her, and I read it. And there were a number of things in the piece that made me think she's not writing this to tell her story. She's writing about it as if she's outside of her body, describing it. And if I told you the story right now, you would understand why she would write about herself in the third person, that she was a victim of a gangbang. And so I said, Juanita, why don't we tell the story and replace the she, her as me, I, rewrite it, and then tell it, read it. And that was my first foray into dramaturgy with the Medea Project. I helped Redessa structure the flow of the script, the flow of the story, and we work out how it ties into the mythologies that we use to frame the stories of women's lives who are incarcerated, um, or women with HIV. And it's a, what is that? It's a thrilling challenge to interpret modern literature and classical myth into modern urban mythology and to make myths live, these classic stories live, making English compelling, telling a story, um, writing a letter. Those things became my tools in working with women who were undereducated, challenged educationally by poverty. Um, and because we had to meet them where they were at, we, my job as dramaturge was to get them to go down to the basics of the story, the heart of the tale, get to the heart of it, because that in that way you have reached somebody else who has the same feeling. Your English doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, what I do sometimes, there are minor grammatical changes that I make, and I don't change any colloquialisms or slangs. Um, I just make these stories accessible for somebody outside of their realm. And because of that, you have a collection of work, of words of women who can talk not only to their people, but get other people outside of their realm who do not understand or want to understand them, to understand what happened to them. And generally, we have them write about what happened to me, because it's not about what they did in jail, it's what happened to them.
I do have a few more questions. We're just going to shift a little bit.
Sure.
If you can talk about your maybe some artists that you enjoy.
Mm. You know how I mean, the Banksy show was not the best show of his, but I like Banksy a lot. I like what he does, or she. Um, the the tricksterism of his work is really fun, and it just, it's like a trowel that goes underneath the bricks of society and lifts up that brick and just exposes the rot. And it's simple, and it's guerrilla, and he just nails it all the time. I really, really am. I'm thrilled by the architecture of Zaha Hadid. Just, I mean, first of all, and one of my day gigs is that I build stuff. I'm a contracts officer for the city and county of San Francisco, or was. So we built buildings and restored buildings and schools and infrastructure. But I've always taken a liking to architecture, and her buildings are, um, they represent the female monuments. They are so stunning in that how they move, or how they seem to move, the shapes. They're like um, they capture an essence of nature, of some of the natural world in a building. Another artist who I love, let me think, Rupert Garcia and the simplicity and the power of his silk screens. I've always loved Rupert. In fact, I kind of channeled Rupert when I was doing Last Supper Party because there's something very pure about his poster style that actually has roots in commercial art from the early 20th century all across the globe.
What creative process excites you the most? And what process are you looking forward to experimenting with?
I think for me, um, I mean, I naturally go towards dramaturgy because I have a love for words, and it's very interesting because I'm from a generation where it was English only in America, and so English, even though subliminally I could understand my mother tongue, I never spoke it. Um, I can't literally translate what she said. I can only I gather the intention. But English, I've learned to love and appreciate almost as if I was an alien from another planet, learning the language of the vicinity and appreciating that I understand it. And not only understand it, but can play with it, tell jokes, make stories from it, communicate, connect. And for us, connection was survival. Because if the more you isolate yourself, especially in our town where we were a very small minority and probably one of the few brown families in our neighborhood at that time, being able to connect was critical.
What creative processes that maybe you haven't tried are you looking forward to experimenting with?
Actually, I've just started because I'm working with another writer right now. His name is Leonard Olivio, and I could tell right away Leonard was a very simpatico person, very intelligent, and he felt the same thing. In fact, we were chatting, and he goes, "Can we meet after this and just like 30 minutes on a Zoom?" Because I'll set it up. So we did, and it was like, boom, instantly hit it off. And he's writing this play called Imaginary Girl on the kidnapping and indoctrination of Patty Hearst. And if you don't know that story, this is the story that happened while I was in college in real life. We were watching Patty Hearst um, give her speech. Mom, I'm okay. They're they follow their demands, and all the way to the shootout in Los Angeles, and finally to her capture. It was a riveting story, but it had not appeared anywhere. We don't see it anymore. We didn't see it. I didn't see it in the 80s and the 90s. It felt like everything was covered in cement. And then Leonard had written this play, and it's a musical play on her kidnapping and her kidnapping programming and uh, the indoctrination. And it's fabulous. It's musical. And so I'm like, I'm in it. I'm in it. So that's the current project. I don't know where else I'm going to go, but yeah. And I'm also writing some. I'm also beginning to write down my stories. You reach a certain age where you can start looking back and it starts to make sense. And I guess I'm at that point. Why did I become an artist?
Mhm.
And it's not become as in choose and therefore I paint, therefore I write, therefore I act.
Mhm.
I am one, and I always have been. And looking back on my life, I mean, I'm in my 60s. I never was not. When I was a child, I would be drawing on, there was no paper in our house, but there were pencils and there were wooden hangers that had a surface that I could draw on with my small child's hands. It was when I grew up a little bit more and realized that I could draw on walls. That's when my mother and my aunts conspired to buy me paints and paper. As poor as we were, they said, we got to give that girl some art supplies. Otherwise, your house will be ruined. So, and I've always expressed, I even expressed with cooking. I love to cook. So, it's the creative impulse is very strong in me. It's been very strong in our entire family, but I found a way to channel it and move it in different directions. And the Last Supper Party was just another one of them.